Hello everyone, and welcome to another math lesson with Mr. Walker from my undisclosed location here at Pasco eSchool. And today we're going to be taking what we've learned about place value and what we've learned about decimals, and we're going to be actually exploring how we can do one of my favorite things with decimals, which is round. For those of you that don't know what round is, let's go ahead and cue the music. Math vocabulary. Awesome. So rounding is when you take a number and you make it into a more reasonable or more easier number to work with, right? By rounding it to a specific place value. Now, some of you from past experiences might have heard something like 5 or more raise the score, or something along those lines, which is great, and they're cool little strategies to use. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them necessarily, but today we're going to learn, again, kind of some of the behind-the-scenes stuff of why that actually works that way, okay? Why is it that when it's 5 or more we raise the score? How do we tell? Kind of look at some of those inner workings there. So in order to do that, there's a couple things you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need your place value chart, a blank place value chart to work with, and then something to write on or something to write with. And we're going to take a look at how we can round decimals and how we can use a vertical number line to help us do that. Okay, that might have been a strategy that you guys have seen before. If not, that's totally cool too, because we're going to practice it today. So here I have my own place value chart, right? And right now we're just going to start with whole numbers, right? So I have my hundreds, my tens, my ones. I do have my tenths here, but our first example, we're just going to worry about whole numbers. Okay, so let's say I had number 155. I'm going to go ahead and just write that up here for right now. And in thinking about this number 155, the first thing I want to do is I want to decompose it into its like different unit values, okay? So we've talked about unit values a little bit in the past, but basically there's different ways that we can make and group like place values in this number to represent it different ways. So let's see, I'm going to draw a couple lines in here. All right, so okay, so first of all, I could write its unit value like for face value for what I'm looking at here. So I would have 100, right? I would have 5 tens, and I would have 5 ones. I could also say that this number has 15 tens and 5 ones. Or I could say that this number has 155 ones, okay? All of those are the same value, they're just, I'm representing the unit values a little bit differently. Because 15 tens, if I counted by 10, 15 times, I would have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 20, 30, 40, 150. Okay, so that would be my 150, and then my 5 more ones, that would give me 155. Then if I had 155 ones altogether, well, that would give me 155, right? So I'm expressing that same number, 155, in 3 different ways, okay? Well, if I wanted to round this number, 155, if I wanted to round it to the nearest, let's say tens place. Okay, if I wanted to round this 155 to the nearest tens, what unit value do you think would be the most beneficial to use? The one to help us kind of understand things the best. Which one would you want to use in order to round to the nearest 10? We could use the one that's written out in hundreds, tens, and ones. We could use the one that's written out in just tens and ones, or the ones that's written out in just ones. Which one do you think would be the easiest for us to use? All right, well, if I wanted to round to the nearest tens, well, I'm going to look at my tens unit place value here, okay? So if I were to draw out a vertical number line here, I'm looking at my tens. Well, I know that 15 tens is going to be my low end, right? 15, and then if I was counting by tens, 16 tens would be my next one, right? Or 150, 160, okay? And I have 155, which is actually smack dab right in the middle, okay? 155 is right in the middle of 150 and 160. So since I'm in the middle, I'm actually going to round up to 160. So 155 rounded to the nearest tens is going to be 160. All right, easy enough there. Since I was rounding to the tens place, I used my tens unit value to kind of help me out and guide me through that. What if I wanted to round to the hundreds place? All right, if I was rounding to the hundreds place, let's go ahead and write that down. Okay, 155 rounded to the nearest hundred. Well, now I have 100, right, to start. So I'm going to put that on my vertical number line. If I counted by 100, and 100 more would be 200. Okay, halfway in between those two would be 150, would be right in the middle, right? All right, and my number is 100, or our number is 155, which is going to fall right about here. So it means it's closer to the 200, right? It's not closer to the 100. It's closer to the 200, so I would round up to 200. Right? And if you were to use that 5 or more raise the score type of thing, you could look at this number and say, well, I'm rounding to the hundreds place. Look at the number next to it is a 5. That means that 1's going to go up to a 2, which is the same thing that we did here, okay? This is just showing us visually why that is. Because if you look on a vertical number line, 100 being our low end, right? Because we have 100, and then 200 being the next one up, our number of 155 falls above the middle, so that means we're going to round up. If it were to fall down here somewhere, anywhere down here, we would round down to 100. But since it fell just above the middle spot, we're going to round them up. All right. So let's take a look at how we can now use this, this framework, this way of thinking to help us to round decimals. All right, guys, so previously we took a look at how we could decompose a whole number, break it apart, look at the different unit values that it has, and then use those unit values to help us to round, okay? Now we're going to take a look at a decimal and see how we can do the same thing, how we can decompose the decimal, kind of break it apart into its different unit values, line them up different ways, and then how we can use that information to help us to round the number. So I'm going to write an example up here first. Again, if you don't have your a place value chart similar to this where we can decompose a number, go ahead and just sketch it out on your whiteboard or paper, something like that, so you can kind of follow along with me. The first number we're going to look at here is going to be 1 and 57 hundredths. So I'm going to write 1 and 57 hundredths up here. And we're going to decompose that number first in a couple different ways using this place value chart. And then we can determine by which way it's decomposed, which way it's broken apart, which we can determine which one we want to use to help us to actually round, okay? So if I take a look at this number, well, the first way I can write it is just kind of the way I see it up here, right? So I can have 1, then there's 5/10 and 7 hundredths, okay? So that's the first kind of most easiest way to break it apart, right? I could also look at this and say, okay, if I were to break it up in terms of tenths, right? How many tenths do I have? Well, right here I would have 15 tenths, right? Because this one, it's one whole, is basically holding in it 10 tenths, okay? So I can bring it over here and I can say that I have 15 tenths and 7 hundredths, okay? And if I were to look at like the hundredths place value here, well, I could say that I have 157 hundredths because this one whole right here is basically holding 100 hundredths and then 5 tenths, which is the same as 50 hundredths and then 7 hundredths, okay? So I can kind of break it down that way into 157 hundredths. So I could think about these in terms of their unit place value in order to kind of see the number broken into a couple different ways, okay? All right, so let's say I wanted to round 157 to the nearest tenth, okay? So I'm going to round. I'm going to round to the nearest tenth, okay? So I need to look at my number, 157, and round it to the nearest tenth. So the way we've broken up the number here, the way we've decomposed it, which one of these could help us the most when we want to try to round to the nearest tenth? Do you think it's the one where we left it as is, as the ones, tens, and hundredths, ones where we looked at the tenths and the hundreds, or the ones where we looked at just the hundredths? Which way do you think would be the most beneficial to us to use? All right, well, I'm going to think that the tenths right here in the middle here, that's going to be our best option to go with, and here's why. I'm going to draw a vertical number line right here, okay? And I want to think about, in terms of tenth, thinking about that tenth place value, what's the low point and what's the high point going to be? It's something we used in 4th grade when we did rounding, okay? What's the low point, what's the high point, and what's the mid? So if I think in terms of tenths, the lowest it's going to be is 15. So I'm going to put 15 tenths here, which we could also rewrite as 1.5, right? 1 and 5 tenths, same as 15 tenths, same thing. Okay, kind of get that idea. What's 1/10 more? So we start here at 15 tenths because that's our low point. That's what we have. What's 1/10 more than that? That'd be 16 tenths, right? So this guy, this is 15 down here. So up here at the top would be 16 tenths or 1 and 6 tenths. I realize I don't really need this here, so I'll kind of squish that out a little bit, but we're good. Okay, so I have my low point is 15 tenths, my high point is 16 tenths. Now we need to think about the middle ground. What's going to be right in the middle of those two? Well, if we think about it this way, 1.5 to 1.6, right in the middle is going to be 15 tenths plus a little more, right? 15 point something it's got to be, right? Because it's not quite 16, but it's more than 15. So it's actually going to be, let's see, 1.55. That's going to be in between the two. So if you were counting up by tenths, right? So we would have 15.1. I'm sorry, you would have 1.51, 1.52, 1.53, 1.54, 1.55. That's going to be our halfway point. Then we have 1 and 56 hundredths, 1 and 57 hundredths, 1 and 58 hundredths, 1 and 59 hundredths, all the way up to 16 hundredths, or 1 and 60 hundredths, okay? And I could put the 0 here, or I can leave that 0 out. Either way, it doesn't really matter. But you can see the continuation as we go up. So this is going to be, our halfway point is 1 and 55 hundredths, 1.55, or 15.5 tenths, however you want to look at it, okay? It's the same value, and that's where our middle point is going to be. So knowing that, we need to look back at what we have here of 15 and 7 hundredths, or we can look at 1 and 57 hundredths, and we could see that that would fall right here, which means it's above halfway. So we're going to round it up as far as tenths are concerned, so that 15 tenths would round up to 16 tenths, and our answer would be 1 and 60 hundredths, or, which is the same as 16 tenths. And there we go. All right. So hopefully that's starting to make sense. So let's take a look at another example real quick, and hopefully it makes a little more sense. So I got myself set up here for another example. I just want to say first, if this whole concept of breaking apart the numbers into their unit place value and using that vertical number line to round, if that seems a little new, a little foreign to you still, that's totally fine, because this is a concept that we work on in 4th grade. So if you're new to this, it's quite all right, and you can stick with some of the strategies that you know. But again, the reason we're learning this is to kind of see the why behind that, okay? So try to stick with me through a few more examples, and if you're still having some trouble, reach out to me, let me know, reach out to your teacher, reach out to your learning guide, and we'll make sure to get you the help and the support that you need, okay? So let's take a look at one more example. We are going to take a look at the number 4 and 381 thousandths, okay? So we're going to look at 4 and 381 thousandths, and we are going to round this number to, you know what, let's just try to round this number to all the different place values, okay? Because I think we can handle that. All right, so first I'm going to throw a little curveball your way, and we're going to round to the nearest 10. Interesting, right? So let's go ahead and decompose this number first, and then we'll come back to rounding it. But first, I can write it this way as 4 ones, 3 tenths, 8 hundredths, and 1 thousandth, okay? With me so far, so that's easy enough. That's kind of like the basic way, the unit place value, the first one. What about, is there any other ways I can rewrite this number? I can decompose this number to make it look a little bit different, kind of rearrange the values a little bit. Still going to have the same value, but can I write it a little differently using my ones, tens, hundreds, or thousandths? Take a minute, try that out, and then we'll come back and practice it. All right, awesome. So I know these 4 ones that I have here, I can rewrite as 40 tenths, right? And I already have 3 tenths here, so really I could think of this as 43 tenths. So I'm going to put 43 tenths here. Now I don't have any ones, I have 43 tenths. I could still have 8 hundredths, and I can have 1 thousandth, okay? All right, if I wanted to continue along this same pattern here, I could think about my 43 tenths that I have, and I could turn them into hundredths, right? So they would be 400 30 hundredths, but I already had 8 hundredths. I already had 8 hundredths, so I'm going to add that 8 hundredths there. And 1 thousandth, because that's what's left over here. And if I wanted to go all the way to thousandths, well, I could say that it would just be, well, I would bring my 438 hundredths into the thousandths. And then I would have the 1 thousandths left over there. So this would actually be 4,381 thousandths, okay? So I can rewrite that number in a bunch of different ways, right? But now how can I use a number line, the vertical number line, to help me round? So I got this chart here that I could use to help me round, and I have what I know about place value and my vertical number line to help me. So if I was rounding to the tens place, right? I don't have anything in the tens place yet. So my lowest point on my vertical number line is going to be a 0. Okay, I'm going to start with a 0. So I have no tens. What would be 10 more than nothing? 10 more than 0. Right, that would be 10. Okay, so that means if we're counting here, we're counting by ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's going to be our midpoint. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, where are we at when we count by ones? What number are we at? Well, we're at 4, and more specifically, we're at 4.381, which is almost to 5, but not quite there yet. So if we're rounding to the tens place, we're going to round down to a 0. So this would actually be 0. Kind of weird, right? Because we're rounding down, and we're rounding to the tens place. So we're not a 5 or above, so we have to round down, okay? So rounding to the tens place really wouldn't get us a good estimate for this. But what if we rounded to the ones place? Okay, well, if we rounded to the ones, all right, let's come over here, get another vertical number line going. So we would start at the lowest one that we have. So what's the lowest one that we have? Well, that's 4. What's 1 more than 4? It'd be 5. Halfway in between 4 and 5 would be 4.5. 4.5, 4 and 5 tenths, however you want to look at it. So if you thought of this like counting wise, you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be your halfway point. 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 5 would be the next one, okay? So we have that on the vertical number line. Our number is 4381. 4, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 8, 1. So it's going to be somewhere right around in here. 4.381. Not quite to 5, right? It's below 5, so we're going to round down. We're going to round down to 4. So 4 and 381 thousandths rounded to the ones place is going to be 4. Cool? All right, let's keep going. What if we rounded to the tenths? We rounded to the tenths place, okay? Try this one out on your own. Draw your vertical number line. Let me know what you get, and then we'll come back and discuss it together. All right, so we're going to round to the tenths now. So if I look at my tenths place, I can see I have 43 tenths. So the low point on this is going to be 43. The high point, if I counted up another tenth, that would be 44. So in between, we would have 431. We can think of it as 432, 433, 434. These would all kind of be like point, right? Point 43.5 would be our halfway or a midpoint. And then we can keep going up to 44. All the way up to 44, okay? So that's our midpoint. We are at 43.8. So 43.8, if we found it on the number line, would be right here. It is above our halfway point, okay? So we're actually going to round up, and we're going to round up to 44. So that means that our number would now become 44 tenths, which is the same as 4 and 4 tenths, okay? Because 44 tenths, we could take 10 of those tenths at a time and turn them into a 1. So we have 10, 20, 30, 40. So they give me my 4 whole, and then I would have 4 tenths left over, okay? All right, sounds good. So what about if we rounded to the hundredths? Why don't you guys go ahead and round to the hundredths, and then we'll come back together and we'll share what we did. Okay, so if I was going to round to the hundredths, I'm going to start in my hundredths place. I have 438 hundredths. I'm going to count up one more hundredth, which would be 439 hundredths. Okay, and then right in between here would be 438.5, right? That would be our halfway spot in between. Our number's 438.1. 438.1, right? Because we would have 1,000th. 438 5,000ths would be the halfway point. So this one is definitely going to round down to 438 hundredths, which is the same as 438 hundredths, okay? Hopefully this is starting to click, starting to gel, starting to make a little bit more sense. Again, if not, please reach out and let me know. Reach out to your learning guide, reach out to another teacher, definitely to get you guys the help that you need. This can be a trickier concept, especially using these vertical number lines and decomposing these numbers, but it's definitely something to help see like how this is working in the background. We're going to do this again in another lesson, and we'll see it again throughout the year. So if you're not feeling super confident after this one, go on to the next lesson, try that one as well, see if that helps a little bit. But again, you can always reach out if you need anything, okay? And I thank you guys very much for watching, and I appreciate all the hard work you do, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.